wrestling crossed the line.
So I pull out my gun. Oh! I'm gonna give you count to 3.
These videos are not for children. If you are a children, then piss off.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is me, Tom, or Topton Wrestling, but I'm here to tell you right now that you are watching V Reviews.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and today I may be in over my head. Now, I've previously talked about the worst of the Attitude Era and the worst of the Ruthless Aggression Era, 2 times over, but now today, I'm here to talk about the worst of TNA, or Impact Wrestling, depending on which decade you decide to watch the brand. I'd like to say that the company had a lot of skeletons in its closet, but that's not really true, as their skeletons were very much out on display. It was pretty much like entering a Halloween store. So as you can imagine, there's a lot to cover here, and quite frankly, I just can't do this alone. I need some Mark to come along and join me and help me list the worst of the worst. And I know just the Marky Mark for that job.
Alright everybody, it's the Hawk here. I'm the leader of the Shove It Squad and the self-proclaimed gut-punching champion. Last time I was here, V tried to derail me by bringing out my video a year after it was recorded because he doesn't like me and he's threatened by my channel. He released that video where I had bad sound quality. Well, that ain't gonna happen this time, V, because I found out my problem. My mic wasn't switched on. I'm mostly known as the Hawk, but the actual channel name's Marky D 123. Feels weird saying that, I never say that. If you want to become a Hawkamaniac, head over to my channel, the link's below. But be prepared to take a brick to the head to show your commitment. We talk a lot of TNA over there, but also a lot of the lesser discussed parts of wrestling. The only screw job you'll see on my channel is me and your ex-girlfriend, and that's a promise. Now I'm gonna shut up before you smack me one. Let's get on with this little video. Abyss, or as I like to call him, the Idiot, was basically TNA's version of Kane, or Mankind. In fact, a lot of WWE fans used Abyss as a shot to make fun of TNA and call them a Wish version of WWE. But the fact is, Abyss earned his place in wrestling with some of the most violent, barbaric matches in TNA history. Hell, this guy's basically crippled nowadays thanks to all the crazy stuff he did in TNA. Still, that won't stop me from referring to him as the Idiot Abyss, and for good reason. One of the many reasons I call him an idiot was down to his short title reign with the world title in 2006. Taking the belt from The Stinger by DQ, after Sting clotheslined the referee. The ref called for the bell. Everyone was confused and Abyss just shoved off the stage and through a table. New world champion, guys. It certainly didn't look like it. Anyway, he lost the title 56 days later, so it didn't really matter, and Christian was the new champion. But Abyss was so stupid he never even asked for a rematch, because he was an idiot.
But don't you worry though, Abyss had plenty of company in the shitty World Champions department. As a matter of fact, he'd be joined by his future stablemate, the cowboy James Storm. James Storm has to be seen as one of TNA's top homegrown talents. The guy was given an intentionally goofy gimmick, but his in-ring work, natural charisma, and mic chops led to him becoming endeared by the Impact audience. So it's no wonder that they would put the title on the guy. But unfortunately, his title run was more like a short sprint. In actuality, James Storm became a transitional champion. The belt on his resume is not a credit to the work that he's done, but instead a reminder to the fact that the company only gave him the belt to build up his tag team partner's career. His former partner Bobby Roode was given a shot at the belt the night before, and despite many, myself included, feeling that he was ready for that role, ready to be the babyface champion, management decided to instead let Kirk Angel retain. A passing of the torch moment had now been snuffed out, and instead, that same opportunity was given to James Storm the next night on Impact. And after winning the title, James Storm offered his best friend an opportunity at the belt that he so coveted. And in turn, he was turned on in a Bobby Roode heel turn. And my head is spinning with how many turns I just had to make. Granted, I guess James Storm probably should have known better than to trust somebody whose last name was Roode, but still, dick move, man. While this moment was impactful in Bobby's title run, both solidifying him as a do-anything-to-win heel and effectively ending their storied partnership, and it did in fact lead to great matches between the two, most notably at Bound for Glory, it still made Storm look like a chump and an afterthought in Bobby's legacy. This angle could have easily built up 2 new main event stars, but instead it built one up on the grave of the other. Storm still to this day continues to do stellar work for the company. But the guy has never regained what he so quickly lost, and that really sucks. So James Storm, believe you me, I mean this when I say it, I'm sorry about your damn luck.
This one's easily forgettable, but did you know that AEW and WCW's Tony Schiavone was in TNA? Okay, I'm stretching that a fair bit. Due to the open door policy in the early days of NWA TNA, you never quite knew who would turn up on a weekly basis. One week Vader would walk in the door, and then he'd never be seen again. And it was similar with Tony. He came into TNA in 2003, looking like he'd just come off a night out in the town doing lines of coke. He had an argument in the ring with Mike Tenay talking about a lot of stuff that happened in WCW. He brought a lot of shoot elements into the segment. Then, probably due to all the aforementioned coke in his system, he decided to side with Vince Russo's SEX faction, which was the original TNA faction, by the way. And they also like to do a lot of insider promos. He would serve as an interviewer for the group for 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, and then he was gone, never to be mentioned again on TNA TV.
If you think Tony Schiavone's Now You See Him, Now You Don't Act in TNA was bad, well, just you wait. For weeks, cryptic videos with the hashtag August 1st warning were aired on Impact. It was clear that whoever this was, it was supposed to be big. The hype for this debut or return, since we didn't know who it was, seemed like it was being built up to be the second coming of Jericho's arrival in the WWF. But instead, what we got was Tito Ortiz, arms folded, making a smug, vaguely constipated face as he looked out into the roster. Now let's get this straight. I don't know a whole lot about a whole lot, and I especially don't know a whole lot about MMA. But Tito's enough of a legend that I knew his name, and I knew that this was a big signing for TNA. Not to mention that this was actually kind of a return to the company for him, as he did do some work for them back in 2005. His 2013 run, however, was very short-lived, as all he really did was join Aces and Eights, which I think a lot of people expected, and helped Bully Ray win back a title that he probably didn't really need help winning back. I mean, listen, I love Chris Sabin. Huge fan of the Motor City Machine Guns, but I just don't think that somebody who looks like Bully Ray is going to need a whole lot of help with somebody who looks like Chris Sabin. I'm just trying to be realistic. That's not a slight against him. I'm just saying. So Tito Ortiz came in, helped Bully win the title, and then just like that, he left never to be seen again. Well, actually, he was pulled from the company by Bellator, the fight company that he worked for, because, you know, that was his real job. But yeah, all of that work for such little payoff. The most memorable part of his whole run in TNA was probably Mr. Kennedy's goofy reaction to his arrival. Seriously, the way Anderson is reacting here, it's like the Shawn selling for Hogan of putting someone over in their debut. Mwah! Thing of beauty. And if that's not dumb enough for you, let's talk about Pacman Jones. The guy was a controversial figure for sure, but as they say, or at least used to say in this industry, controversy creates cash. He was hard to love and easy to hate, and that could be really great for a heel wrestler. You know what else would be great for a heel wrestler? Being able to wrestle. Oh, and also being a heel. Even with the negative persona he had in real life, he was still pushed on screen as a babyface. And despite him signing with the company, he was forbidden by the NFL to get physically involved in wrestling matches. And yet, he was still an on-screen talent who competed in wrestling matches. You can't make this shit up. And why would you? Why would you, honestly? He was paired with who most of you know as R-Truth in a tag team called Team Pacman. So because he wasn't allowed to wrestle matches, this meant that R-Truth would do all of the in-ring work for all of their tag team matches. Meaning this man did all the work and received none of the credit. How you gonna name a two-man team after one of the two men in the team, when the other man in the team is the one who's actually out here winning matches? The matches weren't as bad as they could be, but that's mostly because Ron Killings is an insanely talented individual, and his star shined bright around this time. But the fact that they'd waste so much money on a man whose only in-ring altercation was him throwing a football at Bubba Ray Dudley's head, it's just mind-boggling. Again, Truth was the highlight of their run together, and that's really not a surprise. I don't remember too many things that R-Truth didn't do great.
Which of you out there remember seeing 1,000 different videos in the last year about Victory Road 2011? Yeah, me too. I'll keep it brief. I think I've even made one myself about it. It was a bad time in Jeff Hardy's career, and he spent most of his time drugged up. This happened to coincide with when he was the heel world champion, and it's a shame about what happened next because he was doing a good job as a heel. Hardy was set to defend his world title against the Icon Sting in the Victory Road pay-per-view main event. Instead, what we got was a minute and a half of Jeff Hardy walking around the ring looking dazed and confused. Sting then hit the Scorpion Death Drop and forced his shoulders down even though he tried desperately to kick out. The show went off the air with loud chants of bullshit from the fans and Sting saying, "I agree." Bischoff said the reason the match went ahead still was that it was hard to tell how mashed Jeff was before the match due to his face paint. He said it then became pretty clear at bell time just how bad it was for Jeff, but it was too late. They had to think on the fly and this is the best they could do. Not one of TNA's finest moments. Victory Road. No, you didn't hear me wrong. You've not hit your head and gone backwards in time. Although by the looks of it, you certainly hit a few branches as you fell out of that tree. But no, you did hear me right. But we're talking about another Victory Road. 2009. This one is also a bad show. The one with Jeff Hardy on drugs gets a lot of press, but this is another one that's not great. And just like the one in 2011, it's also remembered for one bad match. Jenna Marasco versus Charmelle. Jenna goes in that category of awful celebrities in wrestling, except she's barely a celebrity. C-lister more like. Jenna was on some reality TV shows that nobody who watched TNA would have heard of. That's besides the point though, because she was hired by TNA to bring eyes to the product. In TNA she mostly hung around with the main event Mafia, and she was revealed to be their financial backer. The other lady in the Mafia was Booker T's wife Charmelle, and they had major friction. TNA decided it'd be a good idea to put the two of them in the ring together, and what we got was one of the worst pay-per-view wrestling matches of all time. Jenna enters the ring doing an entrance that would have made Velvet Sky blush. It's a terrible match, the highlight or the low light if you want, being some slow motion slapping from Jenna. Awesome Kong gets involved and smacks Charmelle one, and then Jenna ends up winning the match by doing one of the sluttiest pins of all time. Is this one as bad as people say it is? Well, yeah, probably.
Now, as gross and hard to watch as that Jenna match was, I don't know if it's quite as bad as having Austin Aries put his A-doubles in your face. And yet that was the unfortunate fate that one Christy Hemme would find herself in. Now, while Austin is probably now most infamous for his backward-ass views and calling everything in our day-to-day lives a hoax, while also simultaneously proclaiming that wrestling is real, there was a time when he was a very respected worker who was known for being a good hand in the ring. I won't lie, as a performer, Austin Aries is up there for me. I've always enjoyed his work. The guy's charismatic, great in the ring, has a good look, can articulate himself. If only he didn't have a little man complex, a short fuse, a big temper, the knack for saying all the wrong things at all the wrong times, an attitude problem, issues with his coworkers, and the constant need for blurting out stupid shit, he would have it all. Anyway, on one episode of Impact Wrestling, as Aries and his partner Bobby Roode were being called to the ring, Christy Hemme made the unforgivable mistake of calling them by their opponents' names. An act so awful, the only reasonable form of punishment was to corner her against a ring post and stand on the top rope, making her see eye to eye with his AA battery. Christy was more than a little uncomfortable with the gesture, and took to Twitter shortly after the incident. The greatest man that ever lived? Let's hope not.
Where do I start with Puppet the Myth Killer? First of all, his name. I'm not even sure if it's acceptable nowadays. Screw it, that's his name and that's what we're calling him. Puppet was a little person who hated other little people. He was also very angry all the time. I think he had little man syndrome, a bit like Dean Malenko. He looked like a gone-off McCain's roast potato. Puppet was on the majority of the early TNA shows, because Jeff Jarrett loves hardcore wrestling, of course. Puppet wasn't just doing hardcore wrestling, though. He was constantly sexually harassing Goldilocks, the backstage interviewer. He shoved himself on camera whilst inside a trash can. And who can forget that other time when he went all Brian Pillman on us and pulled out a gun on Jeff Jarrett in the ring? Yeah, it was never dull when he was about. This guy actually died last year. I don't remember any media about it, though. Next up we have the Johnsons, which is a gimmick that I feel has been blown out of proportion slightly by internet fans. It's like this gimmick was passed through the fans like Chinese whispers, to the point where we now have two naked guys convicted of being dog predators smoking vape pens. They were Richard and Rod, more like Shove and It. They wore beige bodysuits that were meant to look like but they didn't have veins. Apart from these facts, they did nothing else that standard do. Well, I don't know what I was expecting, really. They wrestled a big man style. They weren't actually bad wrestlers. Shame they were dressed like dicks. Anything else? They were managed by Mortimer Plumtree, who looks like an albino version of Harry Potter. They competed on the very first two NWA TNA shows, and then they were gone. So it wasn't enough to make this hawk punch himself in the gut. They went on to the WWE to form the Gemini tag team. But I think they should have used their TNA tag team gimmick. Vince would have loved it and shoved it at the same time. And if you don't agree with that, shut up or I'll smack you one. Who doesn't like Disco? Well, a lot of people, judging from the YouTube comments section. Disco likes to talk. Hell, he seems to do it for a living nowadays, so it shouldn't come as much as a surprise to know that he had a talk show segment in the early days of TNA. This segment was called Jive Talking, and it only ran for 3 episodes because it was really, really boring and stupid. Episode 1, he interviewed Goldilocks and sexually abused her, and screamed at her to show her breasts. Episode 2, he interviewed the Dups, a hillbilly tag team who were also really stupid. Episode 3, he interviewed an unmasked shark boy who was portraying a fake Baldwin brother. He spoke for ages about a made-up film. Oh, did I mention that Disco had a bodyguard? Paulina Gupta from Tough Enough. She was there for 1 week and then gone the next. This was never explained. All of these segments went on for at least 10 minutes at a time. They had fake crowd laughter pipes in. Time isn't wasted if you're getting wasted. But Jive Talking is time wasted no matter what way you spin it. Jive Talking can shove it. I like Grandmaster Sexay in the WWE, but I preferred Scotty, and I think most people did. Even as a kid, I used to look at him and think, something's not quite right with this guy. I would be proved right in the early days of NWA TNA, as Lawler was a regular fixture there. The son of Jerry Lawler cut shoot promos on his dad accusing him of various things, whilst the crowd chanted Jerry's kid, and he would grit his teeth and lose the plot. He had a lot of promo time in TNA, and oh my god, you could see this guy unfolding mentally as the weeks went on in TNA. And it wasn't like a good crazy, it was more like the sort of crazy where I thought this guy needs some serious help. As it was the early days of TNA, he was in the main event scene a lot as they didn't have loads of options. He was fine, nothing spectacular. He was pretty roided up, so he didn't look too strange stood next to Scott Hall and Jeff Jarrett. But it just sounds weird. Say it out loud. Grandmaster Sexay versus Scott Hall in the main event. He never got the strap, but he was an integral part of the first year of TNA, and it's worth watching back, just for how unusual he was acting. Never seen anything quite like it.
Now, I'll be real with you here. Some of my favorite parts of wrestling are the strange, otherworldly gimmicks that could work nowhere else but in wrestling. I love the Mankinds, the Undertakers, the Kanes, the Boogeymans, the Black Reigns. When Dustin Rhodes returned to TNA in 2008, he decided to do so in new face paint, introducing the world to Black Reign. With no relation to Roman or Luther. That's Reigns, singular, not plural. Now, the issue here was that Rhodes was clearly out of shape and hopped up on, well, just probably about anything that he could find. So his performances weren't exactly in-ring gold. Dust. What I did enjoy about the gimmick is that it seemed like a much darker take on the Golden Child. Although I'll be the first to admit that it definitely ventured a little bit too much into Mankind territory for me. The promos, the rat, I don't know, it just seemed a little bit too familiar at times, but it was different enough for me to be vaguely interested. But a lot of people didn't really care for this, and I don't think it helped matters that he was pretty much doing a Dark Knight impression and was wearing what looked to be a Hot Topic trash bag to the ring every night. That probably didn't add any credibility to his incredibly creditless character. They paired him up with Relic, which, by the way, I don't know if it's been said before, but that name is actually killer backwards. This is probably the first time you're hearing about this, but yeah, no, I was surprised too when I found that out. The pairing didn't go anywhere, and at the time, Black Reign actually felt like an impairment to his potential career. Not much to talk about here, and I'm pretty sure Dustin Rhodes would prefer it that way. Nowadays, our boy's doing a lot better, looking both a lot younger and healthier than he did over a decade ago. You'll love to see it.
Remember that time when Samoa Joe was kidnapped by ninjas? Well, you should do, because it's one of the most laughed at storylines TNA ever did. 2010 was a year that you could make an entire video on. But anyway, Joe has just lost a match to Orlando Jordan, so things were going pretty bad for him. He was stomping around in the car park, waiting to go home and eat, when a van pulled up in front of him. 3 fat men in shorts got out and attacked Joe and forced him into the van. These 3 men have become known as the Ninjas, but in reality they look nothing like ninjas. Joe was taken off TV for ages. The storyline was never explained, and Vince Russo just put him back on telly. The explanation was that they were low on good guys on the show. Joe stayed at home for months doing nothing but avoiding the sun and eating by the looks of it. A complete waste of time and effort.
But he was abducted by ninjas! Ninjas! Call the cops!
If you're watching this video, this means I expect you know the beauty of Scott Steiner's TNA promos. They just can't be beaten. And he was truly at his best whenever he was teamed up with Samoa Joe. Steiner would destroy Joe on the mic, mostly saying Joe was fat in 1,000 different ways.
Hey, calm down, okay? Alright? He's fat!
This didn't matter too much for Joe because he would always beat Steiner in the ring. Joe had disappeared off telly for the 50th time, and he came back with a new gimmick. This was now his Nation of Violence gimmick. He was even whiter than before with a drawn on his face, and he was very, very angry all the time. He carried on feuding with longtime rival Scott Steiner in the main event Mafia. He viciously attacked Steiner and held a machete to his throat. It was then insinuated that Joe had mutilated him, but Steiner appeared back on TV a couple weeks later showing no signs of damage, so it can't have been that bad. Other events included Joe attacking Sheikh Abdul-Bashir and telling him that no one in America wanted him here, tying him upside down with the machete in his mouth, and then beating him with a kendo stick. Not long after Taz debuted and would become his manager, Joe would then join the main event Mafia, which Scott Steiner was a member of, so it made absolutely no sense. He tried to kill this man and now they're in the same group. Whatever, it's not worth wasting your sleep over. This one is kind of a broad one, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet like my beak. Let's talk Samoa Joe. We've done a bit of that on this video, and it might feel like I'm dumping on the guy, but I honestly rate him. It's just the way he was booked in TNA was bad. I honestly think some of you have selective memory when it comes to his TNA run. I see people calling him the face of the company. Why? He did nothing but lose. Joe was a fat loser in TNA with some of the worst storylines out of everyone. Joe's feud with Kurt Angle was absolutely 10 out of 10. Incredible. Pat yourself on the back and smack yourself in the gut. It was great. But afterwards, just no. It was all downhill after Joe finished up feuding with Kurt Angle. It looked like he was going downhill from about 2008 onwards, roughly. Every time an ex-WWE guy came into the company, Joe was pushed further down the card. Sting, Mick Foley, RVD, Jeff Hardy, Anderson. Joe just didn't stand a chance of all these guys holding the belt. Whilst all this was going on, Joe was left with such exciting storylines such as being kidnapped by ninjas, losing streaks, and having fake henna tattoos drawn on his face that little girls would get. Now this all being said, he absolutely should have done better in TNA. The crowd loved him. He could have great matches with everyone when he felt like it, and he was a believable main eventer. We can blame the bookers all we want, but I do partially think this is down to Joe's own fault. Every time he got taken off TV for months, he would come back whiter and more out of shape than before. His matches got lazy and he looked unmotivated. The Samoa Joe of TNA 2006 was not a Joe that continued for 10 years, which is why I find it laughable that people can call him the face of the TNA show. I say, just no.
2010 TNA feels more like a weird fever dream than it does any sense of reality, which is probably why I remember watching TNA around this time and desperately hoping that I would wake up. The company was constantly throwing things at the wall to see what would stick, but the things that they were throwing at the wall lost their stickiness a decade or so beforehand. Was that metaphor? You know what? That wasn't a good one. The stuff that they were trying was no longer relevant. Let's just say that. Not everything has to be a fucking metaphor here. That's what it was. Now look, I'm one of the biggest NWO marks you can imagine. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here right now recording this in my V-Generates t-shirt with the NWO design on it. So you can't see. I'll take a picture. So yeah, I'll be real with you here. Hearing that two of my favorite wrestlers in Scott Hall and X-Pac were coming to TNA, joining one of my other all-time favorite wrestlers, Kevin Nash, to bring the band back together again, I was overjoyed. Take my money now. I was on board. However, I should have probably jumped overboard because that ship was already sunk. And in hindsight, I don't really know what I was expecting. Older, out of shape, and now without a care in the world, the team that could not legally be called the New World Order came into the company with the same old song and dance that made them famous. Unfortunately, they weren't climbing the top 100s this time around. The Old World Order, as many knew them as, just weren't impressive. While Pac could still go in the ring, I guess, Nash and Hall just couldn't work the way that they used to. And being much older men, they kinda lost all their cool factor. In an effort to add to their numbers and hopefully add to their quality of matches, the team added Eric Young to the group, shortly after they just turned on him. None of it made sense, and the only entertaining aspect of it was watching TNA stoop so low. This was not the way I wanted to see my favorite wrestlers utilized. But then again, maybe there was no way to utilize them at this point in time. There's so much more that I can say about this run, and I intend on doing so in the future when it gets its own episode. The important thing to remember here, though, here's the Spark Note edition, jot this down. No one wanted to see the Wolfpack back. And the whole ordeal was just a mass destruction.
The year the Hulkster came to TNA doesn't exactly have a good reputation. 2010, it makes TNA fans cringe. And one of the many reasons is the list of wrestlers he signed up to the show. Wrestlers who really had no place on a show in 2010. A bold past his prime Val Venus, Scott Hall and Pac, who were definitely out of it most of the time, and Bubba the Love Sponge, a completely hateable guy. But one signing took the cake as far as wrestlers go, or should I say two. TNA signed the Nasty Boys, a team who made their name in the early 90s. It was now 20 years later. These two obese has-beens were not exactly accepted by the TNA audience, and of course they were shoved with their manager Jimmy Hart. Thankfully their stay was only for a couple of months. They mostly vandalised Team 3D's dressing room and made people change the channel. The Nasties ended up getting fired in the middle of their Team 3D feud because Brian Knobbs acted like an idiot in front of the Spike TV executives, which is the network TNA was on at the time.
2010 was quite the time period for TNA. It's when they went from a place for up-and-coming stars breeding the next generation of top-tier talent while also putting the past on a pedestal, to a retirement home for all of your favorite wrestlers from the past 2 or 3 generations. Which is why not only did we see a return of the NWO and the Nasty Boys, but we also got an ECW reunion. Again! The ECW locker room came to TNA, but weren't legally allowed to call themselves ECW, now being paired together as a faction called EV2, Extreme Version 2. This all really just seemed like some Mark's bad booking decisions that he made in his fantasy wrestling league, but unfortunately it was all too real, I assure you. They were even given their own reunion show. Because, I guess by 2010 we didn't have enough of those yet. The show hosted a flock of talent that were unable to use their original IPs because they were owned by the WWE. The show that was dubbed Hardcore Justice featured Balls Mahoney rebranded as Cojones, Spike Dudley returning as Brother Runt once again, a name for all intents and purposes he absolutely hated, Justin Credible being referred to as PJ Polacco, and Tony Marinara, or Tony Mama Luke, simply being called Tony Luke. The commentary team flubbed the names throughout the entire show and were forced to refer to ECW as that company back in Philly. Blue Meanie was unable to make the show, so in his place they had the Blue Tilly. Great. That ought to put some butts in seats. Raven and Tommy Dreamer had an unnecessarily brutal match for a show that was really supposed to serve as a friendly goodbye. Instead, they turned this into the epilogue in a book that had long been closed. Jerry Lynn, who was supposed to compete in the main event against his longtime rival Rob Van Dam, was also unable to make the show, and in turn, he was replaced by Sabu, in a match that Bill Alfonso would be the manager of both men in the ring. The show was a complete mess, but I guess it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I can actually still watch this show and enjoy it. At least Tracy Smothers was pretty entertaining at the start of the card. Oh yeah, and also, Bubba Ray Dudley had a lightsaber fight with Balls Mahoney. Forgot to write that one down, but it just came to me now. That is something that happened. At the same time, Ric Flair was making his TNA debut, despite having nothing good to say about the company in the past.
What is TNA?
He immediately aligned himself with AJ Styles, to the absolute detriment of the Phenomenal One. Now, usually, an association with Ric Flair should be a great boost to one's career. Why, just look what it did for Arn Anderson. However, here, all it did was negatively stunt Styles' career. For some reason, the company decided to turn Air Styles into the second coming of the Nature Boy, having him enter in what looks to be what would happen if you ordered Ric Flair's robe off of Wish.com. I mean, Styles looked fine in a suit, but he just didn't work as Little Nate, and I'm not just saying that because the role was already taken. It was an awful time to be an AJ Styles fan, and probably also an awful time to be a TNA fan. The thing is that this gimmick could have worked on someone else, but not on AJ. First off, he didn't need that. He was already a made man. Everyone knew AJ Styles. They knew his character. They seen him both be serious and be goofy, and he was great in both. But he wasn't this eccentric, arrogant, larger-than-life personality. His character and in-ring style conflicted heavily with Nate's, so it's really confusing as to why they would choose to have him style and profile. This would be like if WWE decided that Rey Mysterio was going to be the second coming of The Undertaker. It's just not the right match. Following this, the company tried to make their own version of the Four Horsemen called Fortune, but again, that also didn't really work out. AEW is doing a much better job of that today with the Pinnacle. Although all of that probably isn't as bad as a year prior, when the company decided to put the belt on Mick Foley. Now, Mick is an absolute legend, a man who was good on the mic and good at falling out of the ring. But in 2009, the man could barely walk, let alone do so carrying an entire company on his back. He would hobble to the ring and try to put on the performances that he did years prior, but it wasn't happening. While the mind and the heart were willing, his body just would not allow it. I don't even blame the company for having Mick work a couple matches here and there. They probably did improve pay-per-view buys and audience viewership in general, so it makes sense. If you have a star, why not try to utilize him? But to make him the company's top talent for a time just seemed like such a harebrained idea. His run wasn't particularly long or memorable, but just the fact that he won the thing was absolute insanity. Even after losing the belt, TNA almost immediately had him win what was called the Legends Championship at the time. You can say what you want about Terry Funk or Ric Flair, but I don't know if any wrestler's retirement was quite as meaningless as Mick Foley's. After saying goodbye to the world of wrestling, he'd returned the very next year to main event WrestleMania. And now, almost a decade after having officially retired, he's a company's world champion? Come on now. Well, that's all for now. As I said before, TNA has done a lot of bad in their time, and it's going to take some time to explore all of that. So you might, and by might I mean you definitely will, be getting a part 2 to this video. So guys, let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed this, if you're looking forward to part 2, if I'm wasting my time making this. Like my parents said, that's all I ever do is waste my time. I'll never amount to anything. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. That wasn't real. It was a bit. It was a joke. It's fine. It's fine. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. So guys, let me know if you enjoyed this video in the comment section below. I do actually read my comments, so your input is very welcome. I want to thank Marky D for joining me here once again, despite his obvious vehement hatred of me, which I understand. I live with me on a daily basis, and I'm not too fond of myself, and I'm even less fond of Marky, so the fact that this came together is really miraculous, really.
Big V, you are absolutely killing it with this series, brother. But the real killer combo is V and D. Now watch all these other boring YouTube channels flee. Thanks for having me here. And if you like the words that come out of my asshole, head over to my channel. We cover things in wrestling that have not been given as much attention. We tend to delve a bit deeper, just like me and your girl last night. You've been listening to the Hawk Talk, and if you don't agree with what I've said, shove it.
Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here, Marky. If you haven't been to his channel, what are you waiting for? I will provide a link to his channel in the description, so do me a favor, head on over to his channel, hit that big red subscribe button, head to his comment section, and let him know who sent you. With that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, V Infuso. I thank you for joining me again, and I hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.